Well, I can't believe it. It's the third week of 2020 already, and it's Tuesday, which means Dr. Brad Tucker is standing by with the latest science and space headlines. Let's get into it.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
It's a very pumpin' happy Tuesday to you, Brad.
Yes, how are you?
Very good, my friend. This is cool. This is our second record with the new mixer. Kind of gives a bit of energy to the show now.
Yeah, energy's always good. It gets everyone pumped up for, especially here in Canberra. A lot of people returned back to work this week after the holidays, and last week was kind of lost because of smoke. We still have smoke, but everyone just is used to the stench now, unfortunately. So, what's amazing, you pull out clothes out of your cabinet, and you were like, I guess I washed this, but it smells like it's been in a bonfire all night.
Oh, no. I've
had a number of people, they said, hey, when they've gone to Brisbane or Perth recently, they're like, oh, it's clean air, I think.
Is that what that smells like?
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, I've been watching the ANU tweeting out. Obviously, they're most affected, or one of the affected Canberra businesses by all these bushfires. All the bushfires and the smoke, and they're going to be helping out the students as research and classes get back to normal, it seems.
Yeah. So last week, most of the university was closed. And again, this is because of the surrounding fires and so much smoke. And we're still talking about hazardous levels. Even yesterday, even though it was business as normal, the hazardous level, the smoke was still 3 times the hazardous air level. So we're still talking about, that's when you go back to work. So that's how bad it was last week. But the fires are still going. And more importantly, there's a number of people who work and live in those areas who are involved in ANU. Students who are on places who have been evacuated, some people who live in towns that were lost. One of my collaborators in one of the projects, he was one of the towns that got evacuated. His house survived, but his neighbors didn't. So this is a part of our community. I know there's lots of communities in Australia, but especially here in Canberra. And again, in Canberra, we're all very cognizant of what happened. The anniversary of our bushfires in Canberra are on Saturday. So it's still very much in the memory. So ANU said there will be financial support available to students affected. And it's not just your house got burnt down. It's you've been evacuated. You've had to deal with these things. You have had to incur extra travel costs, extra, whatever costs. And there will be money available to them to get them back and running for their research and their studies.
And it is absolutely fantastic of the uni to do that. And of course, we don't mention every week that you are with the ANU. You work with the ANU at Mount Stromlo. So we love the ANU.
Yeah, we're a part of it, right? We're the department. And, ANU's been in the middle of it. We have a coastal campus. So Mount Stromlo is one of the research satellite campuses of ANU. And, Mount Stromlo burnt down in 2003. And that was a big part of what we did. Kyola, our coastal campus, which is done for biology and environment, was in the middle of the Coron fire in November. It survived partially because of the land management practices learned after the fires here. And it was actually where the RFS was headquartered to save the towns of Kyola and Bolly Point. We have rural health clinics around Australia that have been closed and dealt with this. And we have Siding Spring, which is 8 hours north of here, which is where all our night sky telescopes are, which had its own fire in 2013, and it's been surrounded by fires as well. So this has been something that we have really had to deal with this, and the ANU, I think, has been very proactive in putting people's lives and health first. And in fact, any member who's been a rural fire service member has had essentially unlimited paid leave to help out as a rural fire service member, in addition to what the government's providing. Saying there are more important ideas right now than what you need to do, and letting that happen. So I think it's actually been quite. You've had a group who is not focused on a dollar number, but let's get people's lives back going before anything else.
And I saw a bit of commentary about, you mentioned the 2003 fires compared to now, that I saw the commentary during the week that it was 2003 was pretty much all over and done with in a day. This has been going on for weeks, stretching into months.
That's right. So the fires that led into Canberra in 2003, very similar time. It started far into the west, into the Namadgi National Park, hung out there for days, and one day essentially blew through, but then it was done. And I think this is where it's really affected people differently. You look at Black Saturday in Victoria in 2009, it was a very terrible day, but then people were immediately able to start recovery and coping and the various mechanisms that requires that, which takes a long time. Here, you've had towns that have just been on alert for weeks and months. You can't. There hasn't been a way to get back to normal, and so the way to point to we've been affected is not the same with everyone. It's not just we've lost our house. There are people whose family businesses have been shut off for weeks. There are farmers on the South Coast who have not been able to get their produce to markets because the highway's been closed. People fail to realize in Canberra, we have kind of a main highway, the Hume Highway to Sydney. We have the King's Highway to the coast, and we have the highway that goes down to the south of Cooma. At times, all three of those have been closed.
Wow.
The King's Highway, the main highway to the coast, just now reopened. It's been closed for 2 months.
Wow.
So people who lived on there have not been able to get out. They have not been able to get their things out. So you're talking about a very prolonged effect it's hard to pinpoint to one problem. There's so many.
It's similar to how it is up here as well. One of the main routes down through Cunningham's Gap was closed for a good number of weeks. The bushfires had rolled through, but it was the aftermath. It was Cunningham's Gap through the Great Dividing Range, and they were worried about rockfalls for weeks afterwards.
That's right. And so if you live there and that's your livelihood, if you have a business, there's businesses on the towns that go down to the coast. And, in Canberra, everyone goes down to the South Coast for Christmas. And there are towns that most of their business comes from 3 weeks around Christmas, and that's been lost for the year. So I think the effects of these fires that have affected Australia are going to go for much longer than people have had in the past, when the economic output and the effects and the ecological effects are really, that toll is taken down. In fact, that's why the federal government were talked about this bushfire recovery plan. And so, it's important to realize that when people do these things, this is a part of their lives as well.
Talking Science Headlines.
The bushfire smoke that is around South America now is about to come back to Australia.
It is. I've had friends in Chile who have, at sunset, when the sun is setting, they've had a red, smoky sunset because of the fires halfway around the world. And NASA's announced through satellite imagery, this band of smoke is going to come back to Australia. So not only are we going to have the current smoke, we're going to get the old smoke as well. It's, this, as you said, is a scientific thing that is just continuing until these fires go out.
The first cookies baked in space. We talked about the oven heading up there late last year, and they've now put some dough in the oven.
That's right. As I thought they were going to do this in time for Christmas, they baked 5 cookies. I think they even said they left up some milk for Santa. They say 5. I think they might have taste tested a few. But those cookies will be coming back down tonight in the return of the capsule that's at the space station right now.
Talking Science. Stories of the Week.
Well, one of the stories that broke just after we got off recording last week, TESS has discovered a circumbinary planet.
Yes. Otherwise known as...
There's my scientific knowledge.
That's right. It's easier to say Tatooine, because that's the one everyone cares about, right? Circumbinary planets were really popularized by Star Wars and Tatooine. So what we mean is a planet circulating or navigating or orbiting 2 stars, a binary star system. This is important. The sun is quite unique. Most of the stars in the nighttime sky are 2 and 3 star systems. Every star you pretty much look at has multiple stars around it. That is common. So if planets are common, then therefore planets orbiting multiple star systems should be common as well. And people are now starting to find them, and there's people who've been modeling and studying this. And NASA's new TESS telescope found its first circumbinary planet, its first Tatooine. Kepler has discovered others, but TESS has discovered its first system like this.
It is very cool, and a fellow researcher at the ANU, Reggie, came on the show last year to talk about them, and I think she would want me to point out that Gallifrey is also an example, and Magrathea from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as well. But it's a cool discovery, stretching beyond finding exoplanets to now finding them around multiple stars, 2 stars.
It is, and not only is it fun because science fiction. It's another thing where they got it right. Most stars are multiple star systems, so that's the likelihood. But ultimately, there's always been questions of when we look at how planets and stars are formed, how can planets form easily around these stars, and does the planet orbit just one of the stars, or does it orbit both? These are all quite interesting questions. And so the more you find about these, not only do you understand more about how planets and stars are formed, as Reggie talked about, but also how common exoplanets are, what are their rates, and therefore what is the rate of Earth-like planets and planets that can support life. Because if there is a planet like this that supports life, it has to evolve slightly differently, right? How does the planet orbit on a period that allows it to have daytime and nighttime? Or is there always a day side and night side? Does the whole planet always have day side, right? If you're orbiting 2 stars, the whole planet can be in sunlight, and then the whole planet can be in nighttime. So it's not necessarily as straightforward as it might seem in terms of supporting life on these.
And I love what Reggie said about Tatooines, that they're not necessarily just the dry, desolate deserts that Tatooine was described as.
Yeah, there's no reason that it couldn't support a habitable system. It could support liquid water in its phase, because it's all about how does it orbit those planets. And if it orbits in an area that it is not too hot, the Goldilocks zone, and these planets, as Reggie's shown, can actually have Goldilocks zones, then it could be a Earth-like water-rich planet or something different. You can have, as people are finding, gas giants, right? Things like Neptunes and Jupiters orbiting these stars as well. So really starts to putting into the parameters of planetary systems. As we mentioned a few times, it's really just anything and everything you can think of almost exists. And more than we thought, more and more of these things are being found.
And this one is TOI 1338b. It's about 1,300 light years away in the constellation of Pictor. Where's that, Brad?
So Pictor. So it's in one of the kind of the southern constellations. It's a small one, but TOI means TESS object of interest, because one of the things TESS has been trying to do is to look at the nearest star systems to us, and the ones that we call red dwarfs. So these are planet or star systems where the star is a red dwarf, so it's a fainter star. They happen to be the most common type of star, so if they're the most common type of star, therefore they should have the most common types of planets. But because they're a red dwarf, they're much fainter than the sun, therefore they're less bright, therefore they emit less heat. So the habitable zone, is much closer to those stars, which means that they only orbit anywhere between 1 and 20 days. This one orbits every 14 and a half days. And so if they're habitable planets potentially that orbit closer to the star, you can see them transiting quicker. Instead of having to wait for an Earth-like planet, which might take 365 days to do one orbit, means you have to wait 3 years to see it go around 3 times. These you can see it go around 3 times in 2 months.
It is incredible. And another thing that determines life on planets is its own rotation as well, which determines the length of a day. And Venus it doesn't know what it wants.
Yeah, this is the thing that we sometimes fail to talk about is there's this thing, what we call tidally locked, and that is one side of an object facing the other. Now, the moon is famous for this, right? We only have one side of the moon that we can see. And that's because there's always one side of the moon facing Earth. It doesn't mean the other side doesn't exist and it doesn't get light. There's just one side that faces us. So if you're on a planet and there's always one side facing your star, there's always one side with light and one side with nighttime. And Venus is a bit of a funny one where its rotation isn't quite tidally locked, but it's really strange in that the day changes. And you're wondering, how does the day change? Well, that's kind of the question. How does a day change on a planet? It doesn't really change here on Earth, but for Venus, it appears to definitely change.
Is that related at all to its orbit around the sun, which I believe is longer than its rotation?
It is. So, and this is kind of the weird thing, is a day is longer than a year. So a year is, I think, like 116 Earth days, whereas a day is like 240 days, 3 days. So a day is shorter, longer than a year.
And you thought your day at the office was dragging out.
You thought your Mondays were bad. That's right. and this is the point. So a day lasts about 243 Earth days. A year is actually shorter than that, and that's because of the way it's situated. But the problem with this is if you're looking at how to observe a day, if it lasts for 243 Earth days, you have to observe it enough times to define it. So you're kind of talking about 2-3 spins every 2 years. So let's say you need 20 measurements to figure out its day. Well, you have to wait 10 years in order to do that. And this has been the problem with Venus. It rotates so slowly that to exactly define how fast it is or what the exact time is, it's been hard. And the very first mission that did this, about the Magellan mission about 30 years ago, or in the 90s, 30 years ago, Jesus.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Let's not talk about that. Because it was only there for a few years, I think it only spent about 4 years at Venus, it only saw a few rotations. And so some new scientists, they gathered all the data for about 30 years to measure how long the day is changing. And it appears that the Venetian day varies by about 6 to 10 minutes. And this isn't a factor of bad measurements. It actually varies, they think, by 6 to 10 minutes.
It's not a lot of time, but it is enough to throw out the atomic clock.
It is. I mean, 6 minutes out of 243 days is quite minor. But as you said, if you're trying to measure exactly the rotation, and what they actually think is the atmosphere of Venus is so thick, it actually causes a drag. Just as satellites, when they come near our Earth's atmosphere, create a drag, the whole atmosphere of Venus is dragging this planet. And so it's really important, I think, not only to think about Venus, but then we think about all these other planets around other stars. The rotations, their days, might not be as straightforward as you think. It might be very weird, and therefore the way life would exist on this planet has to be quite strange as well. It's not that you have 12 hours of daytime, 12 hours of nighttime roughly. It changes year to year, and so planets and things that would evolve on this planet would have to evolve differently than they would here on Earth. And this could be very similar to other planets around other star systems. You know, if we look at Mercury, for every 3 days, it does 2 years as well. It's what we call 3-2 resonance. So 3 days on Mercury is only 2 years. So again, this isn't just that, hey, this happens to be a weird planet. This is quite common, it appears, for planets near their stars.
Well, hey, look, V Sagittae, binary star, we're probably going to see it by the naked eye in 2083.
So, yeah, if you're looking for long-term plans, and we talked about Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse has been acting funny, and it may explode in the next 20 to 30,000 years. Well, there is a much better object. So V Sagittae is a binary star system. It's what we call a cataclysmic variable, essentially. So you have a star orbiting a white dwarf, and this white dwarf accumulates material, kind of sucks off other things, and at some point they go through periods of explosion. And some new data released by a colleague of mine, another Brad Schaefer, has calculated that at the rate it's accumulating material, this cataclysmic variable should explode by the end of the century. So they think by 2083, this star will do an eruption. And when it erupts, it will be visible, and the effects of it a bit will be felt. So Brad Schaefer is quite interesting. He's an expert in using old data in the sense that a lot of our first measurements are on photographic plates. So he went back through old measurements from the 1890s and said, all right, at this rate from 100 years, from the 1890s essentially, it looks like it's going to go through one of its massive bursts. And when it does, it will appear as a new bright star, something more visible than a naked eye. Will probably feel not only the gravitational waves, if they're sensitive enough, but some of the individual particles leaving this explosion that can be felt. And it will be kind of like a really bright star in the nighttime sky. Not as bright as if Betelgeuse explodes, but decent enough. So look, either way, I recommend staying alive to the end of the century. you're guaranteed to see some celestial explosion.
Very cool. Well, 2083, I'll be 97, so I'll try and not have cataracts.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Plan on having good vision in 2083. And again, keep an eye out. It might happen anytime.
We'll still be podcasting with Talkin Science at that point, though.
Exactly. That's right. Live on the scene from a new merger and a cataclysmic variable.
We'll be on at our new headquarters on Mars.
That's exactly right. Well, Mars will get just as much of a view as Earth will, so that's a good thing.
It'll probably be less polluted, less light pollution around maybe on Mars. No Starlink.
That's true. If you go to Venus, though, right? If you're on the wrong side of Venus, you'll miss it.
Yeah, all the clouds.
243 days. See, that's the thing, right? If you're on Venus and you're on the wrong side, you can miss an entire event because it takes 243 days to spin.
There you go. Well, as real estate agents say, location, location, location.
That's right. That's why I keep going back to Venus sucks.
Brad, appreciate Talking Science with you this week. We'll do it again next week. Like I said in the opener, I can't believe it's week 3 of 2020 already. Love it, dude. Talk to you next week.
See ya.